Hi, welcome to the second episode of Gallant Podcast. Today I am with Mr. Ajay Gulati, Director at Gallant. Welcome to this episode, Ajay.
Thank you.
What does Gallant mean to you?
Gallant to me, I think I'll reframe your question a bit. I'd rather say what Gallant means to my larger, market or people who work with us. Gallant means reliability to them. They realize that if they work with Gallant, we will help them with a great long-lasting solution. We will ensure it meets their needs. We will make sure that it is a value proposition. And more importantly, they know that we will keep coming as many times as it is required to ensure the promises that we made about the life or the duration of the solutions that we are offering to them, we honor them. So, Gallant to me, or I hope to our buyers, it means reliability. That these are the people we've worked with once and we're going to keep coming back to them.
That's a very honest brand, how it looks like. Nasir in previous episode was talking about the journey of Gallant, how it started from 2008, Abhinav Bindra's big medal, and then eventually he founded it in 2016. And you've been with him right from the start.
I've been associated with the company, let's say about 6 to 8 months after its inception. We've come a long way since then. When we started out, we were practically working with 1 or 2 people, but as of now, Gallant has about 700 or 600 odd, clients, relationships, partners, whatever you call them. It's been a very exciting journey,
That's a massive growth in last 8 years. But I'm more curious about the early days, because once you reach a point, then it becomes easier. But the early days are the hardest days. Like people call today that your initial customers or your first million is the hardest to earn. Tell me more about those days.
When we started out, honestly, really didn't have any big fancy ideas. We really didn't have any notions about being the biggest builders of these facilities. We realized that there is a need in the market. We realized that people are looking for quality sports services. The understanding of the realization, especially in the core education market, which we were focusing on, the realization was there. This is no more a luxury. And if you're building a school, if you're running a school, you need to provide your children with safe, reliable sports services. And the market was sort of totally controlled by big European or American brands, which were prohibitively expensive for a lot of educational institutions to look at or even consider. So we started exploring a lot of Asian companies which were manufacturing these services, and they were at par with the quality of European services, but the pricing was much more affordable. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say if I go into a ground and if I go into a school and the school field is, let's say, 15,000 square feet or 1 lakh square feet. I'm just giving you a random example. Let's say I bring in a European surface for them. This in no way, I want to add a disclaimer. This in no way is any sort of a disagreement or criticism of European surfaces. I'm just talking about a value solution that schools were looking at. So if I'm going to build a 1 lakh square feet ground in a school, which let's say is costing about 100 odd rupees a square feet, that's an expense of 1 crore rupees. But if I give them something equally good at something, let's say 70, 75, 80 rupees a square feet with the same quality, that's a saving of 20 lakh rupees, which can be invested in doing the allied infrastructure, maybe the lighting, the fencing, to ensure that the surface or the facility that we are creating performs to its, maximum output. So that is how we started, that is the need that we saw that was there. We went out to a lot of schools, we educated them on the need for these services. It'll be a bit pompous on my part to say that we created this need. The realization was already there. People were school owners, parents, they were realizing that sports is very important now. So what we did was we basically just provided with them with something that they were already looking for. That is how I'll put it. And we've been lucky, a little bit of hard work, we've come this far.
You put it very casually. I'm sure it must not have been that easy.
It isn't, yes, running an organization and, going out and selling these services where sometimes the project value runs into crores. You have to go and educate the customer. You have to make them realize that this may not get you immediate gains in terms of, revenue generation, but this will bring around a significant change in the playing atmosphere in your school. You'll see more student participation in games. You'll not have to worry about any sort of injuries. And more importantly, I'll give you the example of a city like Delhi. A few years ago, I think a notification or a government ruling came out that you cannot draw natural water to maintain your sports fields, or for that matter, any kind of, green fields. And that is where artificial turf played a big role, because these are main surfaces that don't require any watering. There are still, a lot of studies which are clean chit to the environmental aspect of these surfaces. But yes, water is a very scarce resource, and that is something you're saving. They are playable 365 days a year. And more importantly, the safety factor has been taken care of. Something that's being adopted very, very strongly. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. So just to share my anecdote, I'm coming from my daughter's PTM, and in that PTM, annual PTM, the principal will be presenting the report card, the school report card. So I've seen one change over the years. Now they've started talking about the sports part. How many students have actually won medals in sports, participated in district level and national national level sports. So this one change has come, which was not there earlier. It was all about academic performance. But then, like you said, that there was a realization, but then the steps were not being taken.
See, like I just said to you, it's a process, exciting a child to take part in a sport, ensuring that the interest remains. I'll tell you about my son, who's about 11 years old. Till from the age of 7, when he started playing, he's had 6 months of enthusiasm for every single sport that is there under the sun. For 6 months, he wanted to be a footballer. Then he decided he wanted to be a cricketer. Then he figured out swimming is my calling, So that keeps on changing. But the important thing is surfaces, safe surfaces is the basic need that has to be catered to before you can actually ensure that the kid or the child remains interested in that particular sport. And that is what we do. That is the need that we satisfy,
I mean, as parent, it is very important, right? You want your child to be safe when they come back home, and you guys are making sure that it happens. So tell me a bit more about how your interactions evolve, because obviously, like you said, that a lot of education is involved in this. These are like big ticket projects, which means that aligning a lot of stakeholders in an organization. Obviously, there is an acceptance to it. But then how do you overcome the different types of challenges that an interaction poses?
I started in this industry way back in 2010. When I started reaching out to schools, more than the schools, I had a bit of a fear in my head that why would anybody spend so much money on these services? Maybe they don't matter at all.
Yeah.
Why would somebody spend 20, 30 odd lakh rupees on a basketball court? Or maybe, a 1 CR, 1 crore, 2 crore rupee investment on a sports field. But over the years, I think that has remained a challenge anymore. Thousands of schools in this country. I've had the fortune of visiting, let's say, about 1,000 odd schools already across the length and breadth of the country. So yes, the realization is there, but then when the budgeting and everything happens, when we tell them that this is how much it is going to cost, we have to make them understand that this is not a one-year investment. I'll give you the example of a facility we've done up in the hills of Mussoorie in Uttarakhand. It's a big project, but we've given them warranties in the excess of 13 years. So the 2 crore rupee investment spread over a period of 13 years is practically nothing. And that school has great talent in the game of football. The participation is much more in comparison to what it was earlier. So yes, over spread over a period of time, I don't think the investment is huge. It's only the upfront cost that looks immense. And when you make them understand this is not something that you have to replace in 2 years, 3 years time, it's going to be good and workable for a long time to come with a very basic amount of maintenance, then the understanding comes into play. Things work out.
So this involves a lot of human aspect, right? Do you see any kind of support coming from ecosystem, for example, the CSR activities or the government supporting in some ways, or banks making funding easier? Do you see that happening?
That is already happening. We've already had the fortune of doing some CSR projects for the Tata Group. There's one we've done for a mining major in Rajasthan. There's another one we've done in Odisha for a hockey facility. So the change is there. I still think the realization with big companies or corporates is not there that sports is something, that can be equally, valuable in CSR activity. I think there's a lot of CSR happening in academics and opening schools, in opening facilities, related to education. But I think if the money starts flowing to sports activities as well, the change is going to happen. It's much better than what it was before, but the pace is still very slow. I think it has to get better in the times to come. The government is already spending a lot. Government is still the principal investor, buyer or the constructor of sports facilities in the country. The major chunk of massive or big sports facilities that are being made, they're still being funded by the government. I don't think I have any message for the government. I'm sure there are smarter people up there who know, what needs to be done to expand the reach of sports in the country. But what we are doing in the education sector, we're trying to make a small change on a day-to-day basis. We have teams and people spread across the country. We're talking to a lot of people. We're showing them facilities that have been constructed. So the excitement is translating into actual decision-making also with a lot of people.
The journey is catching pace, but yes, there is a long way to go.
We were patient people. It can take its time. The important thing to ensure is that we do the right work. We give the quality that we promised, and we maintain and take care of these facilities. That is what Gallant is renowned for in the market. That is the reason we made a name for ourselves in the market. Like I said, reliability. That's the most important thing.
But the good part is that now you have a clock in place, whether it is 2036 or 2040. That deadline is there. So there is a strong need to build this at a faster pace. versus the previous decades?
I agree. I mean, I was, hearing some news bite a few days ago that the government is probably planning to bid for the 2036 Olympics, which would be an amazing thing to do. But then bidding, if you look at the history of the Olympics, most of the bidding countries have also been the biggest winners of medals in that particular event. Be it the Beijing Olympics or the Tokyo Olympics. Maybe if we have to bid for it, we have to ensure that we come on top in terms of medal tally as well. So again, the basic requirement is good sports facilities for the kid or the child in the neighborhood to go and play without a worry. If we can do some sort of a contribution to that, we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that 2036 is still far, but it has to start now so that we are prepared when it comes.
It is not too far, I think. It's time flies by. There is a lot of work yet to be done. We barely have facilities in the country. There is a lot of construction activity that is required. I have no comments to make on the coaching aspect of it or teaching this, as far as teaching the sport is concerned. At the risk of being repetitive, the first and primary requirement is good sports facilities to play at.
You are one person who is meeting people 15-16 days a month, new set of people, traveling length and breadth of the country. Like you mentioned, you covered about 1,000 schools so far. Would you like to share some memories which really stayed with you for a long time? Like, that is something which I live for.
It's been an exciting journey. I am a people's person. I go and like to meet new people all the time. Maybe that's the reason I'm a little successful at what I do. I will tell you about the first project that we did in the hills of Mussoorie in a school, St. George's College. And now we were there to make a presentation. Me and Mr. Ali were together there for a presentation. And incidentally, there was an old gentleman sitting there in the school who was hearing all three of our companies give their presentation. And I recognized that this gentleman happened to be an old school principal of mine, okay? And now I was mortally scared of that person when I was in school, I clearly remember. And when we were walking out, the decision had still not been taken who would be selected. I gently just tapped him on the shoulder when I was walking out. And he stopped me and he's like, "Why did you do that?" I said, I was mortally scared of touching you while I was still a student and I wanted to do that, once. And we were coming down the hills back to Dehradun and we got a call. And, the principal called us upstairs and the gentleman was still there. He said, "I don't know nothing about this sport. I don't understand artificial turf at all. But I still think I would trust the next student to do this work. And, a next student would not do anything that is, not favorable to our requirement." And that is how I closed my first big project in this industry. And that story, always remains with me.
That's like a very fond memory, right? We all have this, we were scared of our principals, etc.
Yeah.
But then you got to touch him and eventually meet him.
I kept on meeting him a few times after we went to the school again for some sort of work or the other. So that's one memory that has stayed. And, again, I want to say, the only reason we've come this far is we've tried to do an excellent job. We've delivered on what we've promised, and that is what we are known for in the market, and I hope we can maintain that winning streak on the basis of this reliability.
Absolutely. The way you are going about it, there is honesty and there is impact. So both things are necessary.
Thank you.
So Ajay, we all know about how much work has happened in Odisha when it comes to hockey, and there are stories published in newspaper. Do you see this happening in tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, or is it like a more of a metro phenomena where Odisha is an exception?
See, when we started out, we thought that considering the investment involved, considering the fact that all major upgradations usually happen in metro cities, this will remain a very big city restricted activity. We were entirely wrong. We've had the fortune of doing a lot of work in tier 2, tier 3 cities. There are, great schools coming up everywhere in the country, in all cities in the country, and the adoption of these services is happening everywhere. I don't want to create some sort of a FOMO when I'm saying this. If you're actually not building a sports facility in your school or in your, educational facility, regardless of whichever city you are in, you're falling behind. Somebody in your city is already planning something like that. I speak to a lot of school owners, the discussion that happen is all schools more or less look the same now. All teachers speak good English, there are AC classrooms, AC buses. So this is a serious statement that they made. For a lot of school owners, sports is probably a very important differentiating factor. I want to focused wholly on sports because that is the only way for me to distinguish my school from the school, let's say 3 or 5 kilometers down the road, which was probably 5 years or 7 years early. Maybe it was all about the percentage, 98%, 99%, scary percentages. The numbers always scare me. But sports is a big differentiating factor now. So yes, the activity is happening all across the country, smaller towns, cities. It's just not a luxury anymore. It is a necessity. Some basic facility has to be included in any new educational facility coming up, or even in old schools or old educational institutions. Something has to be there on a professional level if they really want to call themselves a school or an institution where an all-round development of the child is happening.
That's a very pertinent statement. I mean, you're not a school if you don't have all the pillars covered.
Again, I'm not an educationist. I'm sure there is a lot of smart work already happening, but basic sports has to be there. Basic sports facilities have to be there.
Yeah, basic.
And regardless of who does it, I'm not saying it because I want us to be getting all the work. There are other players in the market. Some activity happens in a city or in a town. Automatically, the other schools or universities or education institutions have an impetus to do something similar. So we also get work. Somebody, it's not a zero-sum game. If somebody else does it, we're not losing. We're probably going to get work in the next institution.
So this was episode 2 of our Gallant podcast. Waiting for you for the next episode. We are going to go to some arena and show you the real turf that is worked out by Gallant team.
Thank you, Prashant.